Nobody stays outside because I said so. Victoria Caldwell's voice came through the locked shelter door while 41 evacuees stood behind me in driving rain. I remember that sentence because of what followed it. Click. One clean mechanical sound from the electronic lock, almost too small to hear beneath the wind hammering the metal awning. The access panel flashed red. Behind the glass, Victoria lowered her master key and looked at me like the conversation was finished. It wasn't. Rainwater ran down my collar and soaked through my work shirt. The air smelled like wet asphalt, pine needles, and ozone, with that sharp electric edge storms carry when the power grid is getting nervous. Somewhere behind the clubhouse, the emergency generator idled with a low diesel hum I knew better than my own refrigerator. I had serviced that generator for 6 years. I had replaced its transfer switch, labeled its breakers, tested its fuel lines, and helped convert this building into the safest reinforced structure within several miles. Tonight, the lights were glowing inside. The heat was running. Rows of folding chairs were waiting behind those doors, and 41 people couldn't reach any of it. Victoria, open the shelter. I kept my voice level. She folded her arms. Her cream-colored raincoat looked almost spotless behind the glass. This facility belongs to Willow Creek residents, Dan. These people are not our responsibility. These people. I turned around. Frank. 3 hours earlier, that building had looked almost ordinary. Gray siding, white trim, a flag snapping above the entrance while storm clouds stacked over the western horizon like layers of dirty steel. I had arrived at 4:17 that afternoon after the county upgraded the storm watch and asked designated shelters to verify emergency systems. My name is Daniel Mercer, but everybody in Willow Creek calls me Dan. I am 43 years old, and I have spent most of my adult life fixing things other people only notice when they stop working. Electrical panels, heating systems, generators, pumps, access controls. If it hums, clicks, leaks, or refuses to start at 2 in the morning, somebody eventually calls me. 6 years earlier, Willow Creek hired me to supervise maintenance for its clubhouse and common facilities. Back then, the shelter conversion had been one of my biggest projects. The county helped fund reinforced interior rooms, emergency lighting, backup power, and accessibility improvements. I still remembered installing the bronze plaque beside the mechanical room because Victoria complained that it did not match the lobby decor. I told her emergency funding was not supposed to match the furniture. She did not laugh. Victoria Caldwell rarely laughed when she was not controlling the joke. She had been president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association for 4 years, and she treated the neighborhood like a private company with 300 employees who somehow forgot they were allowed to disagree with management. She drove a spotless white sport utility vehicle, carried a leather binder to every meeting, and could turn the phrase community standards into something that sounded like a court order. Our problems started months before the storm. She wanted electronic access added to the shelter entrance because, according to her, residents were using the clubhouse without authorization. I installed the hardware but refused to give her unrestricted control over the emergency programming. The county occupancy documents were clear enough for me. When the facility was activated for emergency use, normal clubhouse rules did not matter. Victoria hated that answer. 2 weeks before the storm, I noticed administrative permissions had been changed anyway. I asked her about it. She smiled over the rim of her coffee and said the board had updated its security policy. I requested the written authorization. Nothing arrived. That afternoon, while I checked the generator, the first warning tone sounded from my phone. Severe weather was moving faster than predicted. I smelled diesel as the generator completed its automatic test, steady and clean. Voltage held. Fuel tank sat above 3/4. Emergency lights worked. Everything was ready. Then Victoria walked into the mechanical room wearing polished boots and carrying that leather binder. "We need to discuss. Tonight," she said. "If people start showing up, nobody enters without proof of Willow Creek residency." I thought I had misheard her over the generator. This is an activated emergency shelter. Her expression never changed. It is still our property. Then she placed a brass master key on top of her binder. That tiny piece of metal caught the fluorescent light, and for reasons I could not explain yet, I could not stop looking at it. The brass key told me Victoria had already made up her mind. I shut the generator panel and followed her into the main hallway, where the air smelled like lemon cleaner and fresh coffee from the kitchen. Outside, The sky had gone from gray to greenish black, and the wind was pushing leaves across the parking lot in tight circles. My phone sounded again. The storm watch had become a warning. Victoria barely looked at hers. She opened her binder instead. The board cannot expose homeowners to unnecessary liability, she said. If outsiders come here and something happens, Willow Creek could be responsible. I stared at her. The county emergency plan directs evacuees here when this facility is activated. The county does not pay our insurance premiums. That was Victoria. Every human problem became a line item if she stared at it long enough. I reminded her about the county funding, the emergency occupancy paperwork, and the inspections we completed when the clubhouse was converted. She tapped one manicured finger against the binder. You handle maintenance. I handle association policy. I had heard that sentence before. Usually it involved parking permits or pool hours. Hearing it, while weather sirens were beginning to sound in the distance, made it feel different. I stepped into the office and called 2 board members. Robert Gaines answered first. The moment I mentioned emergency access, his voice dropped. Victoria said she has it handled. That is not what I asked. Silence. Then he said he was with his family and disconnected. Linda Parker never answered. I left a message anyway. At 5:38, the county alert changed again. Low-lying areas east of Willow Creek were being advised to prepare for evacuation. That included Cedar Bend, a mobile home community sitting less than 2 miles away near the creek. I knew people there. Frank Delaney had repaired lawn equipment out of his garage for 20 years. Families from Cedar Bend came to our church food drives. They were not strangers just because Victoria could not find their names on an association spreadsheet. I returned to the entrance and tested my maintenance credential. Green light. Click. The door opened. I tested it again. Green. Everything worked normally. Victoria watched from the reception desk. When emergency activation begins, I said, this entrance needs to remain available. I understand the system, Dan. The way she said it made the back of my neck tighten. At 6:12, rain began striking the windows hard enough to blur the parking lot. The lights flickered once. The generator controller clicked into standby. Then my phone rang. It was Rachel Foster from County Emergency Management. Her voice was clipped and fast. Cedar Bend was evacuating. Roads near the creek were already taking water. We are directing residents to your location, she said. Expect the first group within 20 minutes. I looked toward Victoria. She was standing beside the access panel with her brass key in one hand and her telephone in the other. Understood, I told Rachel. I ended the call and walked toward the entrance. Victoria turned the key. The access panel chirped. My maintenance credential disappeared from the screen. I tried my card. Red light. I tried again. Red. Victoria slipped the key into her coat pocket. Temporary security measure, she said. Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the subdivision. Through the rain, headlights appeared at the far end of the parking lot. The first evacuees had arrived, and for the first time that evening, I understood exactly what Victoria had been preparing to do. The first car stopped crooked across 2 parking spaces because the driver could barely see the painted lines through the rain. Frank Delaney climbed out with his canvas bag held over his head, followed by an older couple from Cedar Bend. Another sport utility vehicle pulled in behind them, then a pickup truck, then 2 more cars. Within minutes, the covered entrance was crowded with wet coats, grocery bags, pet carriers, blankets, and people staring at the locked glass doors as if there had been some mistake. I stepped outside before Victoria could stop me. The wind caught the door behind me and nearly tore it from my hand. Rain hit my face sideways, cold enough to sting. Stay under the awning, I told everyone. We are sorting out access. I hated the words as soon as I said them. There was nothing to sort out. The shelter was operational. The people were here. Victoria was simply refusing to open it. Frank recognized me and pushed through the crowd. Water streamed from the bill of his baseball cap. County message sent us straight here, Dan. I know. Then why is the door locked? Through the glass, Victoria was speaking on her telephone. She saw me watching and turned slightly away. I counted people while more arrived. 23, 31, 37, 41. The youngest looked about 6. The oldest was probably in his 70s. Nobody was shouting. That somehow made it worse. They were waiting because they believed somebody inside knew what they were doing. My phone vibrated with another emergency alert. The creek had exceeded flood stage. Travel was becoming dangerous. I knocked hard enough on the glass to get Victoria's attention. She approached without opening the door. I pointed toward the people behind me. 41 evacuees. County directed. Open it. She shook her head. I already explained the policy. There is no membership policy during emergency activation. Her expression tightened. Do not tell me how to run my association. A woman beside Frank pulled a blanket tighter around her daughter. That ended the argument for me. I took out my telephone and photographed the access panel, the locked entrance, and the time displayed on my screen. 6:49. Then I called Rachel Foster. The call connected, broke into static, and returned. I explained everything in less than 30 seconds. Rachel went silent. She locked and activated shelter? Yes. Keep everyone protected from the weather. I am sending personnel, but several roads are blocked. Do not interfere with the electronic system until we arrive. Preserve everything. Preserve everything. Those two words changed the way I looked at the building. I stopped seeing a locked door and started seeing evidence. I led the group around the west side toward the maintenance bay, a concrete service area attached to the reinforced portion of the clubhouse. It was not designed as the primary shelter, but it was dry, enclosed, and connected to backup power. My mechanical key still worked there. The deadbolt turned with a heavy metallic clunk. Warm air rolled out carrying the familiar smell of plywood, machine oil, and dust. We moved everyone inside. I switched on the emergency lights, rolled out portable heaters, and found sealed cases of bottled water in storage. Frank helped arrange folding chairs while I checked that the interior service door remained secured. Then my telephone buzzed. A message from Linda Parker, the board member who had ignored my earlier call, appeared on the screen. She had forwarded an email from Victoria. The timestamp was 4:52 that afternoon, long before Cedar Bend had been ordered to evacuate. The message was short. Under no circumstances are non-members to be admitted tonight. I read it twice while the generator hummed behind the wall. This had never been a panic decision made during a storm. Victoria had planned the lockout before the first evacuee ever reached our parking lot. The strange part was how ordinary the hardware still looked. The same reader, the same brass key, the same door I had serviced dozens of times without thinking twice about it. Nothing mechanical had failed. The generator had started. The heaters worked. The emergency lights worked. The access controller had obeyed every command it received. That was what made the night so unsettling. The danger had not come from broken equipment. It had come from one person using working equipment exactly the wrong way. And now, every timestamp was preserving that choice more accurately than any argument ever could. The email changed the temperature in the room more than any heater could. I stood beside the humming electrical panel with rain ticking against the service door and read Victoria's words a third time. Under no circumstances. Not if the roads flooded. Not if the county sent them. Not if 41 people arrived with nowhere safer to go. This was not confusion. It was policy she had invented before the emergency even started. I saved the message, captured the timestamp, and forwarded a copy to Rachel Foster. Then I asked Linda one question. Was there a board vote? Her answer came less than a minute later. No. Victoria sent it herself. That mattered. I had spent 22 years troubleshooting systems, and bad systems usually fail the same way. You find one thing that should not be there, then trace it backward until you discover what caused it. So while Frank helped distribute bottled water, I opened the maintenance cabinet where we kept inspection records. Paper folders smelled faintly of dust and machine oil. Generator service logs. Fire inspections. Electrical permits. Then I saw the old bronze plaque through the mechanical room doorway. County Emergency Resilience Grant. I remembered mounting it 6 years earlier for screws into concrete block, while Victoria complained that bronze looked outdated. I pulled the shelter conversion binder from the bottom shelf. The pages were thick and slightly curled from humidity. Near the front was the county funding agreement. The clubhouse had received public money for reinforced rooms, emergency lighting, backup power, accessibility upgrades, and temporary disaster shelter operations. I did not pretend to be an attorney, so I did not start inventing conclusions. I photographed the relevant pages and sent them to Rachel with a simple message. You need to see this. Her response came quickly. Preserve the original documents. County staff will review them. Then another detail caught my eye. The equipment schedule listed emergency cots, portable radios, first aid cabinets, battery lanterns, and 2 additional portable generators purchased during a later preparedness upgrade. I knew that building better than anyone. I had never seen two portable generators. I checked the storage inventory. Nothing. I checked the locked equipment cage. One old pressure washer, extension, cords, traffic cones, and 3 boxes of holiday decorations. No generators. No radios matching the listed quantity. No stack of emergency cots. My stomach tightened. Missing equipment did not automatically mean wrongdoing, and I knew better than to make accusations without records. But it gave me another question, and questions were becoming dangerous for Victoria. I called Linda again. This time she answered. Wind hissed through her telephone. Dan, I should have spoken up earlier. I need the latest emergency preparedness expense report. Silence. Then I heard papers moving. Victoria handles that account. Can you access the board copies? Another pause. Give me 5 minutes. While I waited, the lights flickered. The generator transfer switch snapped, and the room dropped into darkness for less than a second before emergency power came alive. The children barely noticed. Frank looked toward me and nodded. The system worked exactly as designed. My telephone buzzed. Linda had sent 3 pages of invoices. I opened the first one and felt that same stillness return. Willow Creek had been billed thousands of dollars for emergency equipment supposedly stored inside the building where I was standing. I looked around at the empty shelves, then back at the invoices. Outside, thunder rolled over the neighborhood. The storm was getting worse, but I was beginning to understand why Victoria wanted absolute control of that shelter. The invoices were not proof by themselves, but they were enough to tell me I needed to stop guessing and start preserving. I zoomed in on the first page. 2 portable generators for $1,800 each. 12 emergency radios. 40 folding cots. Rechargeable lanterns. Water purification equipment. Every line carried an approval code from the preparedness account, and Victoria Caldwell's name appeared beneath the authorization field. I checked the equipment cage again, slower this time. Bare concrete floor. Metal shelves. Extension cords. Cleaning supplies. Christmas wreaths in plastic tubs. Nothing resembling what those invoices described. Frank appeared in the doorway carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. You look like a man who found a problem. He handed me one. The coffee was weak and smelled slightly burned, but the warmth felt good against my fingers. I found paperwork, I said. That is not the same thing yet. He nodded. Smart answer. My telephone rang before I could drink. Rachel was still several miles away. A fallen tree had blocked the fastest route, and emergency crews were moving through side streets. Do not confront Victoria about the financial records, she told me. Keep the evacuees safe. Keep the originals where they are. We will handle the rest when we arrive. That was exactly what I needed to hear, because part of me wanted to walk through that hallway, put the invoices on Victoria's desk, and demand explanations. But anger does not preserve evidence. Patience does. I returned to the maintenance bay and counted everyone again. 41. The heaters were holding the room near 68 degrees. A little boy had fallen asleep across 3 folding chairs while his mother tucked a jacket beneath his head. An elderly woman was charging her telephone from an emergency outlet. Frank was organizing bottled water by the door like he had worked there for years. That was when Victoria started pounding on the interior service door. Dan, open this immediately. Her voice came through the metal, sharp even beneath the generator. I stepped closer but kept the door secured. These people are staying dry until county personnel arrive. You are using association property without authorization. I almost laughed, but the sleeping child behind me made the whole thing too serious. They were sent to an emergency shelter. You are an employee, Dan. Do not confuse maintenance access with authority. There it was again. Authority. Victoria loved that word when she believed it belonged to her. I looked at the service door, then at the 41 people behind me. I could have spent the next 20 minutes arguing. Instead, I walked away from her voice and checked the generator fuel gauge. 71%. Plenty. Rachel needed time, and my job was to give her that time without letting the storm create another problem. 10 minutes later, Linda sent another message. She had found meeting minutes showing that the board had never approved Victoria's restriction on emergency shelter access. Then she sent something even more important, a copy of the original county operating agreement. I forwarded it directly to Rachel without interpreting it. Her reply came almost immediately. County Council is reviewing this now. Stay where you are. Outside, rainwater rushed along the curb like a shallow river. Through the narrow service window, I could see Victoria crossing the lobby toward her office, brass master key still in her hand. She thought I was building a case against her. She was wrong. At that moment, I cared about one thing more than invoices, access logs, or winning an argument. 41 people had been sent somewhere safe, and I intended to keep them safe until the people with actual authority arrived. At 8:23, white emergency lights finally appeared through the ring, not flashing wildly, just moving slowly across the parking lot as two county vehicles followed a utility truck around the flooded curb. I watched through the narrow service window while Rachel Foster stepped out wearing a yellow rain shell, waterproof boots, and the expression of someone who had already read enough documents to know she was not arriving for a routine shelter check. Deputy Aaron Cole came with her, along with two county emergency workers carrying equipment cases. I unlocked the exterior maintenance door and met them beneath the awning. The rain smelled like mud, wet cedar, and diesel exhaust. 41. Rachel asked. 41. Everyone accounted for. Any medical emergencies? None. Cold and tired, but stable. She nodded once. Good. Now show me everything. I handed her my telephone first. Victoria's email. Linda's messages. Photographs of the locked entrance. The access panel. The county funding agreement. The equipment invoices. Rachel did not react dramatically. She simply scrolled, checked timestamps, and asked precise questions. That made me trust her more. Aaron photographed the original documents where they sat before anyone moved them. One county worker checked the shelter inventory. Another connected a laptop to the access controller using the service port. Then Victoria appeared in the hallway. She had changed somehow without changing anything. Same cream raincoat. Same perfect hair. Same leather binder. But her smile was working harder now. Rachel, thank goodness. Dan has created an unnecessary situation. Rachel looked up from my telephone. Did you order the main shelter entrance locked? Victoria glanced at me. I implemented temporary access controls for liability reasons. Did the board authorize that? As president, I have discretion during unusual circumstances. Rachel held up the operating agreement. We are going to review that. Victoria's smile disappeared. This is private association property. And right now, Rachel said calmly, it is an activated emergency facility connected to a county response. We are opening the designated shelter while the documents are reviewed. Victoria started to object, but Rachel was already speaking to the technician. A few keystrokes later, the main entrance reader changed from red to green. From inside the maintenance bay, I heard the lock release. Click. The same small sound Victoria had used earlier suddenly meant the opposite thing. Frank helped me move everyone through the interior route toward the main shelter. Warm lights filled the reinforced room. County workers unfolded chairs and began checking names. The coffee maker sputtered in the kitchen. Wet jackets hung over chair backs. For the first time all evening, shoulders started dropping instead of tightening. Victoria watched the room fill, then turned sharply toward her office. I saw the brass key appear in her hand. She crossed the lobby, reached her door, and swiped her administrative credential. Beep. Red light. She frowned and tried again. Beep. Red. Then she inserted the brass key into the electronic override. Nothing happened. Dan. She turned toward me. What did you do? I was standing beside Frank with 2 cases of bottled water between us. I did not move. Nothing. Rachel stepped forward. County Information Technology temporarily suspended administrative access while records related to the emergency system are preserved. Victoria stared at her. Office door as rain rattled the windows behind us. You cannot lock me out of my own office. Rachel's voice stayed quiet. We are preserving records, Victoria. Nobody is accusing you of anything tonight, but nobody is altering anything either. The brass key remained between Victoria's fingers. For hours, she had treated that little piece of metal like proof that authority belonged to whoever controlled the door. Now she stood beneath the red access light, unable to enter the room where she had written the order that started all of this. Behind her, 41 people were finally inside the shelter she had tried to keep empty. For the next hour, the storm outside became background noise to a different kind of pressure building inside the clubhouse. Rain hammered the roof. The generator held a steady low hum. Somewhere near the kitchen, coffee dripped into a metal pot, while county workers moved quietly between tables, checking names and handing out dry blankets. 41 evacuees were finally where they should have been from the beginning. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I kept watching the county technician work at a folding table near the lobby. Every few minutes, another record appeared on his screen. Access logs, administrative changes, credential histories. Victoria sat 20 feet away with her leather binder closed across her knees. For once, she was not giving orders. Rachel called me over at 9:16. She turned the laptop so I could see it. Recognize these changes? I leaned closer. My maintenance credential had been restricted at 6:11, 1 minute before the rain intensified and shortly before Cedar Bend evacuees began arriving. The command came from Victoria's administrative account. Earlier records showed other emergency access settings had been modified during the previous 2 weeks. I did not authorize any of that, I said. Rachel nodded. That is why we preserve records before drawing conclusions. Then Aaron returned from the equipment cage carrying copies of the inventory sheets. Several items listed as purchased could not be located. Rachel placed those pages beside the invoices Linda had sent. She did not accuse Victoria of stealing anything. Neither did I. Facts did not need decoration. Equipment had been billed. Equipment was missing. The board had not approved the lockout. Access settings had been changed. Victoria's email had ordered non-members excluded before evacuation began. Each fact was small by itself. Together, they sounded like tumblers falling into place inside a lock. Then Linda arrived. Her husband had driven her through the western entrance after the road reopened. Her hair was damp, and she carried a plastic document box against her chest. She set it on Rachel's table and removed printed board statements, expense reports, and meeting minutes. I should have questioned this months ago, she said. Victoria stood immediately. Linda, you are not authorized to release association records. Linda looked at her for several seconds. They are board records, Victoria. I am on the board. That sentence changed the room. Robert Gaines called Rachel 10 minutes later and agreed to provide his copies as well. Another board member forwarded emails. Then residents began remembering things. Emergency supply purchases Victoria had announced, but nobody had seen. Preparedness fees added to annual assessments. Closed meetings described as security planning. The story was no longer coming from me. That mattered. I was just the maintenance supervisor who had noticed empty shelves. Now the paper trail belonged to everyone. Rachel eventually walked over to Victoria and explained that the county would refer the financial discrepancies for formal review and that the association board would need independent accounting before making conclusions about the missing equipment. Victoria's face went pale, but she said nothing. Outside, the wind had finally started losing its edge. Frank came beside me carrying an empty coffee cup. Funny thing about storms, he said. They show you what was already loose. I looked across the lobby. The Bronze County plaque caught the emergency lights. The access reader beside Victoria's office still glowed red. The brass key that had seemed so important earlier now rested uselessly on top of her closed binder. Then the main shelter door opened as another county. Worker stepped inside, and its reader flashed green. Red for the office, green for the shelter. I could not have designed a clearer explanation of what had changed. By 6:40 the next morning, the storm had moved east, leaving Willow Creek under a sky the color of wet concrete. I stepped outside and smelled mud, pine, and the faint diesel haze left by the generator. Water rushed through the gutters, carrying leaves toward the storm drains. Branches covered the parking lot. Somewhere beyond the clubhouse, a utility crew was already working, and the steady beep of a reversing truck echoed between the houses. Behind me, the shelter doors stood open. Frank was one of the first evacuees to leave. He had slept maybe 2 hours, but he still stopped beside me carrying the same canvas bag he had arrived with. Cedar Bend Road is open again, he said. County says my place is still standing. Good. He handed me the gray blanket he had used overnight. You kept your head when everybody else was losing theirs. I looked through the doorway at families gathering bags and children finishing cereal from paper bowls. The generator kept its head. I just stayed near it. Frank laughed softly and walked toward the county shuttle. By 7:15, all 41 evacuees were accounted for and cleared to leave or transfer to another county facility. Nobody had needed emergency medical treatment. That was the number I cared about most. 41 arrived. 41 made it through the night safely. Everything else came afterward. The association board held an emergency meeting 3 days later. Victoria was temporarily removed from administrative duties while the shelter access decisions and preparedness spending were reviewed. An independent accountant was brought in. County officials requested records connected to the emergency grants. The missing equipment invoices were referred for formal examination, along with the access logs and authorization records. I did not celebrate any of it. An investigation is not a conviction, and paperwork deserves the same patience people do. What mattered was that nobody could quietly erase the questions anymore. Linda later told me the board voted unanimously to place emergency shelter access under a written activation procedure that no single association officer could override. My maintenance credentials were restored, but I asked for something better than personal access. I wanted the emergency system configured so that county activation automatically switched the shelter entrance into emergency mode. No president, no board member, no maintenance supervisor standing between evacuees and a designated safe room. The county approved the change. 2 weeks later, I installed it myself. The final test happened on a bright Tuesday morning. Rachel stood beside me while I triggered the simulation. The access panel changed from normal operation to emergency status. Green light. Click. The door released exactly as designed. I thought about that first click in the storm, when Victoria had stood behind the glass believing a locked door proved she was in control. Then I looked across the lobby toward her old office. The county preservation hold had ended, the records had been copied, and the board had changed the administrative locks. The brass master key Victoria carried that night no longer controlled anything. I still keep the bronze county plaque polished. Most residents walk past without reading it. I never do. It reminds me that authority is not ownership, and a title does not place anyone above the rules. Victoria thought power meant deciding who had to remain outside. That storm taught all of us something simpler. Real authority opens the door when people need it most, and justice does not have to shout over thunder. Sometimes it sounds like one quiet click, followed by a green light. So tell me this. If you had been standing outside that shelter with 41 people in driving rain, would you have waited for county personnel, or would you have found another way to open the doors immediately? Drop your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy stories where an HOA pushes its authority too far and its own records expose the truth, hit like, subscribe, and stick around.